such a fine line between stupid and clever.
It's the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
My name is Sergeant Frank Drebin, Detective Lieutenant Police Squad, a special detail of the police department. There had been a recent wave of gorgeous fashion models found naked and unconscious in laundromats in the West Side. Unfortunately, I was assigned to investigate holdups at neighborhood credit unions.
If the holdup man had been where Sally Decker said, the bullet should have penetrated deeper. Let me show you what we did. These guns are identical to the one that killed Jim Johnson. Watch carefully as I test fired this gun into these videotapes of Barbara Walters' interviews. You can see it completely destroys the Burt Reynolds interview and everything from Bo Derek to Paul Newman, but only up to the point where Barbara asks him, is it difficult to love? Now let me show you what happens when the gun is fired from 3 feet, which is the distance Sally claimed the shots were fired from. Notice? Complete destruction. Right up to the point where she asked Katharine Hepburn what kind of tree she'd like to be.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Ready to move out.
Before we start, I'd like to say something. There's no reason why you shouldn't have complete confidence in your chances to come out of this thing alive and in one piece.
From coast to coast, from border to border, from one end to the other and all points in between. The Classic Guitar Rock Podcast is on.
Yes! That's awesome!
We crank up and break down the great guitar-driven rock of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And you are invited to come along.
We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes, it's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
And now, your host, Jeremy Lunnan.
Yeah, we don't know anything about that fella there. Who is he? Where's he come from?
It's time for the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
Welcome to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. And we're together again in the same place, John.
It is wonderful. We're in the basement again, the beautiful basement.
In the same basement. So for the past couple months, we've been doing the live streams. We've been in 2 different places, which is, that's good too. But it's nice to actually get in the same place.
Indeed. I think Zoom has its place, and I think that place should be over.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Zoom needs to go away.
Yeah. So we were talking about some upgrades. The problem with upgrades, John, is money. Right, but we're talking about upgrades.
Money's no object.
That's right. When you have none, it is no object. Yeah,
so that's when creativity comes in.
That's right. So we are on the cusp. I don't want to make a date. I don't want to promise, but we're on the cusp of doing some things. I think it'll be cool. And in fact, by the way, I wanted to thank John for all his hard work on the website.
Well, thank you.
And one thing I mentioned this. I think I've mentioned this on an episode. We've started a weekly radio show. There's the Classic Guitar Rock Time Machine, which is a weekly radio show. And it's on 4 stations now, but I think we'll probably be up to 5 or 6 by the end of the week.
Do you remember what stations those are? Because I have them right in front of me.
I do. They're right. That's what I was going to say. You can go to the website. It's on Zenith Classic Rock.
Indeed.
It's on Tweakle.
TWEACLE Radio.
Yeah, Tweakle Radio, Retro Sounds Radio, and then the Mad Music Asylum.
The Mad Music Asylum.
And I believe, I should know this, I believe these are all in the UK.
I did not check them out.
Yeah.
Tweakle sounds incredibly British.
Yeah, I think they're all in the UK. And I checked them all out, because I want to make sure that we're playing on stations that are a good fit, right? And they're all excellent. I spent time listening to all of them. So go check those stations out. And you know what's really cool about all of these stations is if you're used to the traditional formatted classic rock stations, where you hear the same songs.
Yes.
Oh, these have very broad playlists, which is cool. So you'll hear stuff that is pretty broad.
I think that would be the easiest job in the world, to be the program manager for a classic rock station.
Oh, totally. Because there's like 100 songs.
There's like 40 albums. You covered it,
Yeah, I know the local one here, and this is not an exaggeration. The local one here you would hear Edgar Winter Frankenstein every day. And there's nothing wrong with that song.
On heavy rotation.
On heavy rotation. But every day you would hear that song. You know, if you heard it 4 p.m. one day, you'd hear it at 6 p.m. the next day. But that's just the way it is. It was really formatted.
So I heard that, like in radio stations that were classic rock, they would play like Inagata Vita when they had to go to the bathroom for a long time. So they'd turn the record on and they'd walk away for 10 minutes and come back.
Yeah. Well, I told you, I think I've told this story, but I'm telling it again. It's a great story. So I worked at a country station, K-Law 101, Oklahoma's best country. And they actually had remote starts for the cart machines in the restroom. So and all the songs were on cart.
What's a cart machine, first of all?
A cart machine is like I know you're asking, so I explained, but the endless loop tapes, they look like an 8-track, right? And so the radio stations they'd have 40-second carts. Those are for your 30-second commercials. They'd have 70-second carts. Those are for your 60-second commercials. So what they do is that 60-second commercial would play, and then it would queue up in 10 seconds. So it would stop at the beginning of the commercial.
If it's an 8-track player, and this was kind of like the early form of sampling, if you wanted to stick it.
Kind of.
You couldn't reverse it, but it would always go. You had a tone on it, and this tone was picked up by a magnetic head inside the machine. It would always go to the same place.
Right.
So when you push that button, it would play. Right. But if you fudged it,
right.
If you had a 60-second and you misplayed it,
yep,
you had to wait 70 seconds for that thing to come
all the way around. Yep. Absolutely.
So you could trigger those from the bathroom.
From the bathroom. So what you could do is we had 6 cart machines. You'd load up, maybe you'd load up your liner, which would say Oklahoma's best country, right? And then you'd line up your song, then maybe another song. And 6 cart machines, you could have 30 minutes of audio lined up if with songs or whatever. So you could sit on the can and just fire off your songs from the bathroom. It was awesome. We should look at something like that for the basement.
Yeah. Like we'll do our podcast from the bathroom.
From the bathroom. Yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't.
There's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't.
Anyways, but Inagata Davida is a prime one. When I worked at the oldies station here in Spokane, here's the problem with oldies. Oldies songs are short.
Yeah.
2 minutes, 30 seconds, 3 minutes. So I'm down in the basement. The control room was down in the basement. The bathroom's upstairs. You're like, crap, what do I got? I got Hey Jude. That's 6 minutes, 12 seconds. If I have to, that'd work, right? But then you got a lot of 450. You got like, Age of Aquarius. That's 450, 5 minutes.
You didn't have like your off-air reel, like when things go really. We called it an old crap reel when I was in television broadcasting. If the world was burning down and nuclear missiles were firing, and you couldn't get the thing to play, you'd put this tape in the deck, and it would be like these. The more you know.
Yeah, and so we actually did have one of those at one station in Oklahoma. And here's what's really scary: we're in the middle of Tornado Alley, so every spring we'd have storms. And fortunately, it never happened to me. But if you were on the air and the transmitter went down, there's this whole little book. You're supposed to drive to the transmitter that's like 3 miles out of town and reset it and do all this. And I'm like, if there's a tornado going on, I'm not doing that. But we actually had a big reel, like an emergency reel that was, 60 minutes that you could put on if you had to run out to adjust the plate voltage or something on the transmitter. So it's crazy. Fortunately, I never had to do that, but I was on the air a couple times and there was like tornadoes, and you'd have to come on and there's a tornado warning for Comanche County, and it's like,
I remember working for local television, and during snowstorms, we'd have to have somebody with a broom go shovel off the satellite dishes, or we couldn't get a signal. Literally it would change the shape of the dish enough so that it wouldn't aim onto the receiver.
Nice. So
the old days.
So, this is local inside stuff. You worked at KHQ, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so
a local NBC affiliate.
NBC affiliate here in Spokane, Washington. Well, I had a friend that worked at KHQ.
No, what's his name?
I can't even remember his name. I worked with the lady at the radio station. Her husband worked at KHQ. I can't even remember his name. But he was telling us that they sent out, this is probably 93, 94. So it might have been before your time.
A little bit before my time, yeah.
So they actually sent out a memo to the staff that said, okay, from now on, I don't want any more of your get off the South Hill. Okay. Because every single of their live local things were within like 2 blocks of the station. Because you could tell, now KHQ's downtown, right? Have they moved downtown?
That was a big deal. That's why they have that big tall mast on there. Because
that's right.
Local, when you're broadcasting from a mobile truck, it has to be line of sight.
Right.
So moving Q6 from the top of the hill to the bottom of the valley was a bad move. Then you have to do a bounce. You have to go from one antenna to another.
And bounce it. Okay.
So bounces would degrade the signal, obviously, but that was part of the problem.
Yeah.
It's like the further you go away, the worse your signal is.
And this was when they were still up on the South Hill. And it was funny. It was a joke because we even noticed it. Every time they do, I am with breaking news, they're talking about the blizzard that's coming, or they're talking about this. They are never more than about 2 blocks away from the station. They're at the shopping center right there on Regal on the South Hill. They're across the street at Ferris High School. I mean, it's like, and they finally said, guys, quit being lazy. It's because every single thing they did was in about a 3-block radius.
And also, there's more snow on the South Hill than downtown.
Absolutely.
Snow makes for good TV.
Yeah, it does. You don't know how many broadcasts you'd see from the parking lot. And I'm out here in the parking lot. It's like, okay, whatever.
Well, speaking of satellite dishes, when Q6 moved from the South Hill to downtown, they had a surplus sale. So we're getting rid of a bunch of old equipment.
Oh.
And they had a little mini satellite dish. And you know what it was?
What?
It was an aluminum disc sled that kids would use in the 60s before plastic. So it was literally this 3-foot diameter aluminum like circular sled or circular like ski bob or whatever.
And
they put a receiver on it, and that's what they would use. It's brilliant.
Wow. So were you working there when they made the move?
Yes.
Wow. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry about the local stuff, but it is
broadcast.
It is funny. So anyways, cool stuff on the website. We mentioned our blog. There is a blog up now, but we're still rearranging some things. Dan Ranke is our blogger, and he'll be posting some more stuff, and so you'll be seeing more of that. But the website is a work in progress.
And what's the website address again?
It is classicguitarrock.com.
Indeed.
And there's all kinds of stuff. It's a great site. It's a great site. Of course, you can get the episodes there, but there'll be some other cool stuff there, like the internet stations that are carrying the Classic Guitar Rock Time Machine radio show. And it was the last episode of the Time Machine show that made me think about what we want to talk about tonight. But before we get to that, did you see this news item about Van Halen?
I did.
Okay,
it was on Ultimate Guitar Rock?
Yeah, I saw it on a few different places, and it kind of, I saw 3 different YouTube stations talking about it, but YouTube channels talking about it. But both Joe Satriani and Jason Newsted, the bass player from Metallica, have talked about being in communication with the Van Halen camp about a potential tour to celebrate, Van Halen, obviously. And I thought, well, that's really weird.
Because Wolfgang wouldn't be a part of it then. They already got a bass player.
Well, that's what. Yeah. What about Michael Anthony?
Yeah. What about Michael
still
Anthony?
Around. So David Lee Roth responded with kind of a jokey. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just made kind of a joke about it. But I don't think Satriani would just make it up and talk about it.
If you had, let's say you had Sammy Hagar, you had Joe Satriani and Michael Anthony playing bass, you'd have Chickenfoot with Alex as the drummer.
That's basically what you'd have. Yeah.
So Jason Newsted is an interesting choice.
Yeah, that's kind of out of left field.
In my mind, I thought he left Metallica like a few years ago. It's been almost 20 years now. It's a long time. And he's an artist now.
He's an artist, and
he sells his painting for $60,000.
And the last music I saw him do, he was playing guitar. He wasn't playing bass. I don't have any other input other than I just thought it was weird. There's no mention of Michael Anthony or Wolfgang.
Yeah.
in any of the stuff. All Satriani said was, well, yeah, it would be a celebration of, obviously, of Eddie, but also, the whole spectrum of Van Halen. So from what he said, it sounds like the Sammy era, the Gary Sharon era, that would all be part of it, but that would imply Roth would be involved, Sammy would be involved. They don't get along.
No, no one gets along with David Lee Roth.
And so I don't know. I kind of think this will probably never happen. That's my thought.
Here's my take. So remember Queen, 20 years after Freddie Mercury died, they had a like an endorsed cover band for Queen. And Mark Martel, a terrific singer out of Canada, got the singing gig, and they had it was like a television show where they had different guitar players, different basses, and drummers basically try out for this spot on this Queen cover band, and they were fantastic, and they went on a global tour, yada yada yada. I think that's what Van Halen should do. They should say, we're going to have a Van Halen endorsed cover band, and we're going to hire the best in the business, and they're going to play the Van Halen tunes you love. I'd go see that. That
would be cool. I mean, I'd go see it if it came about in whatever form. I'd go see it just because I love Van Halen. I'm scratching my head that there's no mention of Michael Anthony, who's still alive and a great bass player and singer still. It's interesting.
Very interesting.
Probably nothing will come of it.
No.
Okay. So when we come back, here was the idea. This is what triggered this topic for tonight. The last episode of the Classic Guitar Rock Time Machine was 1978. And as I went back and was playing these songs, I was just scratching my head at, man, what a great year 78 was. 78 was a great year, especially for debut albums.
It was a monster year.
Packed. So I thought, let's just talk about 1978.
Let's do it.
So when we come back, we're going to talk about 1978.
The basement can be a lonely place.
Hello? Hello? Is anyone in here?
Yet, at the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast, the basement is all that Jeremy and John have. Their wives don't want them geeking out on classic rock in the living room. Can you blame them? But you can help. For as little as $3 a month, you can become a supporter on Patreon. Join today and end the cycle. Visit patreon.com/classic guitar rock. They'll still be in the basement, but at least it's not your basement.
Hello? Is anyone in here?
Exclusively on ESPN Plus, UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
From the top of the Empire State Building in New York City. Well, okay, I'm in a basement in Spokane, Washington. It's the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
Welcome back to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. Jeremy and John here. Our topic is 1978. And one thing that is funny, just Google, I Googled best rock albums of 1978, right? And depending on the website, it's all subjective. So there are some websites that it's these obscure metal bands you'd never even heard of, right? And then there's other ones that are very more new wave tinged or whatever. But it's fascinating. And of course, there's some albums that were so huge that they're on every list.
And some albums have been monumentally like touchstones of music.
Oh,
like changing genre kind of music.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about 1978, but first I'm going to put John on the spot. What were you doing in 1978? Where were you? How old were you? You were just a kid.
I was 8 years old. Okay. I was living in Salt Lake City, Utah, West Jordan, Utah. Awesome. And we just moved there. And I was going to primary.
Was primary's little church meeting, right? That you go to every week?
Yes.
You go to? Okay, so was music on your radar? Was this pre or post clock radio?
This is pre-clock radio.
Okay.
So my experience with music of at least having an earworm was the year or two previous to that.
Okay.
My family we lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and we took a trip down to Galveston.
Okay.
And I heard that I've been walking the streets alone.
Glenn Campbell, who had a famous song called Galveston also.
Yeah, he did.
Jimmy Webb song.
So I heard that song, it must have been 15 times on the trip down and back. And that was the first time I remember remembering music.
Yeah. Rhinestone Cowboy, great song.
It was played, overplayed. It was the songs of summer.
So I'm a little older, so I was 11. But 78, as I look back, that's really, I have distinct memories. I lived in Oklahoma. Paul McCartney, Somebody Knocking on the Door. Somebody's knocking at my door. Was that 78 or 77? I don't know. I have distinct memories of that song. But one song I know for sure was 1978. I just remember like riding home from school, hearing this song all the time. Sultans of Swing. Right. So Dire Straits, the Cars, I remember hearing the Cars, Double Vision. Okay. Foreigner. I mean,
you're hitting all my.
Okay. Well, see, that was just, and this was just, I was 11. So I was just starting to notice music. And so I have a warm spot for 1978 because there's a lot of great albums. And then a lot of the albums I didn't really discover till later. That did come out in 78. There were some phenomenal ones. So throw some at us, John.
So let's talk about Dire Straits. I think that's their debut album, right?
It is their debut album.
So in the world of classic guitar rock, there's certain songs that basically guitar players will learn as kind of like a study.
Yeah.
Like an example of their prowess of the instrument.
It's kind of like
Sultans of Swing is the one for clean guitar.
It's like when we talk about standards, Sultans of Swing is kind of like a standard. I agree.
Yeah. And if you listen to it, all the guitar fills are different every single time.
Yep.
And this guy, he doesn't play the same part twice. He doesn't play the same riff twice. He makes basically a clean guitar masterpiece on his debut album.
Yeah. So much so, John, and some people will disagree, I think that was their best album.
I think it might have been.
And I love it. To this day, I love it. And I remember I didn't actually own that album probably till I was a sophomore in high school. But to your point, I started playing in a band, not really a band. We never played anywhere, but I started playing with this guy. So here's me, 15 years old. He's like 20. Me and my drummer friend, we go to this guy, Bill, and we play. And he was like, because to this point, I'm like trying to learn my Judas Priest songs, and I'm Mr. Metalhead. And we went and played with this guy, and he's making me learn like Dire Straits songs. And I'm playing the rhythm part of Dire, he's playing all the hard stuff, but he could play it. And it was like, well, and then we're playing like Marshall Tucker songs and Steve Miller songs, a lot of clean tone stuff. So it was a real education for me. And at that point, I went out and bought that Dire Straits album. And that's an album that I still, to this day, I listen to just front to back. And the whole album is it's beautiful. It's well awesome done. Awesome album.
So what's another album from 78 that you really think made a dent in rock or made it into music?
Well, the first Van Halen album.
Oh, you took it.
Sorry, dude. Sorry. But and I'll let you talk about it. But I mean, that one is in terms of really breaking new ground, I'd have to say that album.
And that was when Eruption's on that album, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of those songs you hear. Of course, I heard it later, but it's one of those songs you hear. You have no idea what he's doing on this.
What is that?
Is it? You thought it was a keyboard of something, but you had no idea you could play a keyboard that fast. Mm-hmm. And it turned out to be two-hand tapping, where guitar players you pinch with if you're right-handed, you pinch with your left, and you dance your fingers on the board, and you don't pick.
You got both hands on the board.
Both hands are on the board, and you're kind of pounding the string into the fret.
Yeah.
And that was just so unusual at the time. A lot of people say he didn't originate that, which is whatever. I mean, he put it on the map.
He put it on the map, and even if you can find obscure jazz guitar players from the 50s that get two hands up on, but it's not like he was doing.
Yeah. And it was classical too. He has those classical turns in it. It's like it's almost a Bach etude.
It totally is. It totally is. And he started out. He and his brother were both classically trained pianists. They moved to L.A. when they were. I think Eddie was like 8.
So the dad was Dutch. And
Dad was Dutch. Mom was Filipino or something.
I'd have to see.
But they spoke Dutch. And imagine that. Didn't speak English when they came to the U.S. in like the early 60s, right? And Eddie's like 8 or something, and Alex is a couple years older. But they were both classically trained pianists. So they spent their first few years playing the piano, And then at some point, Alex started playing guitar, and Eddie was playing drums, and they switched at some point. I don't know if it's the classical music background, the fact that they were from another country. It's like his style was just so completely different than anything else at that time.
His mother's name is Eugenia, and she's from Indonesia.
Indonesia, okay. And their dad was Dutch, and their dad, Jan, he actually plays the clarinet solo on Big Bad Bill is Sweet William Now on the Diver Down. Yeah, it's a really jazzy, musical family, right? Very musical family. And you even said this, John, when we were talking about rhythm guitarists, that Eddie Van Halen's rhythm is really unique.
It's underrated.
Totally underrated.
And I think rhythm guitars are generally underrated,
But to be honest, you think about it, it's way more important.
Yeah.
Look at the Who. Pete Townsend hardly ever busted out a solo.
No.
He didn't. He played great rhythm parts and wrote great songs.
Speaking of the Who.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Did you get it?
I know the one you're going to say.
Which one is it?
It's Who Are You, right?
Yeah.
It's a great album.
So I think this is where the guitar player, what's his name again?
Pete Townsend.
Sorry, I'm getting aged here. Yeah. So Pete Townsend, he started really experimenting with synthesizers and Lowry organs at the time. And this really impacted the way these albums sounded. So that's my take on it.
And it was the next several albums.
Oh, yes.
Right? Because even like Eminence Front. It all starts with that whole. So I'm going to tell a story about John. So we played in our little band, we'd play a song, and then at the tail end, what was it? It was Not Broken. Yeah. We'd play Not Broken, which is I don't know, 90s.
Goo Goo Dolls.
Goo Goo Dolls. So we played this Goo Goo Doll song.
In the key of E.
Not Broken, in the key of E. And we'd come right into Baba O'Reilly.
Right.
And John worked out, I don't know how you did it, but you worked out that little keyboard figure, a little sample. It sounded really good. But that's exactly what Townsend was doing. And it's all over at the beginning of Who Are You? That whole.
Yeah.
It's at the beginning of Eminence Front. That became a big part of their sound.
And I think that really affected music. I think that use of a harder band using keyboards I think that influenced a lot of people.
Yeah.
Too.
There's a documentary. Is it The Kids Are All Right? Or was there one later? Anyways, one of the documentaries shows Pete messing with these early synthesizers, and he was completely nerding out on it. And he really was the driving force of the Who.
And those old modular synths, it wasn't like modern synthesizers where you go, I want a piano, and you push a button. It's like you were running, it was like a switchboard operator.
Oh, and you're tweaking all these
knobs, and you got cables you're plugging in, and you got to have almost an engineering degree to get this thing to work.
Yeah, and actually, Dark Side of the Moon, they were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, that, of course, the last album with Keith Moon. So he died shortly after that album, which was sad. But that's a great album. It's an awesome album.
And I got one for you.
Okay.
Journey's Infinity album.
Infinity. And what's unique about that one?
That's the first time Steve Perry's on the album.
Absolutely.
And it completely changed Journey.
It changed them. And you know what? Journey before Steve Perry, it was a cool band. But it was a completely different band.
Right.
And they would have fiddled around and being a cool fusion band forever until, if he hadn't come along. Yeah, I agree. It completely changed the band.
So the title track, or the hottest track on that album was Wheel in the Sky.
Yeah.
So that's one of those songs you hear all the time on classic rock radio.
Yeah.
Comes right from 1978.
I think that's my favorite Journey song, actually.
Yeah.
I love that song.
And what's your next one?
Okay, here's one that's not on any list. It's City Nights by Nick Gilder.
City Nights by
Hot Child in the City.
Oh, there we
Remember
go.
that song? Okay, so, and I've talked about this before. This is one of my pet albums for tasty, catchy guitar playing. This is one of my all-time favorite. It's just really, it's not hard rock. He's got this kind of androgynous, I thought it was a girl singing the first time I heard it, right? He kind of looks like a girl.
Yeah, a little bit.
But man, it's just got the catchiest, coolest guitar playing. There's two guitar players. There's a lot of interchange between the two. It's just, I love it. It's one of my favorite albums. And it came out in 1978. And that's when I didn't discover till 20 years later, right? I had known Hot Child in the City, but then sometime, John, here's a promise to everyone. As I look into a lot of this, Chrysalis Records.
Oh, yeah.
So many of my favorite songs are, Blondie was Chrysalis. Nick Gilder was Chrysalis. UFO was Chrysalis. Pat Benatar was Chrysalis. There's something about the Chrysalis albums. There's, UFO, definitely not new wave. They're more kind of the hard rock, but all this other stuff was kind of walking that line of new wave kind of, but they've all got great guitar sounds. They've all got, the production is great. So at some point I want to talk about Chrysalis because we could do a whole show on Chrysalis, but that Nick Gilder album is another one from 78. Everyone should check out.
So my next choice is a pair of albums.
Okay.
And the first one, let's see, I didn't check the release dates on them, but they both released in the same year. Let's see if I can find it. Where is it at? The album is Peter Gabriel 3.
Oh.
Called Melt. And the title track, or the best track off that one, is called Games Without Frontiers. That was
I did not know that was that
1978.
Far back. Wow.
So that was a very modern sounding track. That one is, the whole album is really good.
So is Salisbury Hill from that album, or was that earlier?
I think that's earlier.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I mean,
okay.
I don't know the complete discography, but the other one I want to talk about was Genesis released an album that year.
And
it's called And Then There Were Three.
Yes.
And you know why that's a special album?
Well, for a couple reasons. It's because there was only 3 of them.
Yes. It wasn't. We're done with Peter Gabriel. He can make his own albums.
Yeah, yeah. But it wasn't the first one without Peter Gabriel.
It wasn't?
No.
Okay.
No, that was because I think who they lost there was Steve Hackett. Because I don't have this in front of me, but I think Wind and Wuthering came, and then there might even be another one, and then there was 3. But it's a live album.
Yeah. So the title track off that one, or not title track, but the track I really like off that one is, let me find it again. Follow You, Follow Me.
Oh, it's a great song. And it has a great guitar part.
It's got a laid back feel. It's not driving rock. It's kind of like you're on your heels.
And so here's the thing about Genesis. There are, and lots of bands are this way. You could make the case about lots of bands. It's almost like they're 2 different bands. There's I'm going to offend people when I say this. I don't like the Peter Gabriel Genesis. It's just too weird.
It's really weird. It's long and it's pompous.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I like Peter Gabriel once he got on his own.
Right.
And I love Wind and Wuthering. That's one of my favorite Genesis albums. That was, Phil does a great job. There's an interesting story about that too, because when Peter Gabriel left, they're like, what are we going to do now? And they're like auditioning people. And, Peter Gabriel would dress like a flower and
wear a dress and
makeup.
And wear like a rabbit. And
he was a performance artist.
It was
guy.
like art.
It was art.
It was musical art.
Yeah.
And I think people that went to the concerts were just going because it was odd.
It was
they're not going to like, oh, I'm going to sing along with the band on this track.
right.
This 15-minute long, exposition on the chord of G or whatever.
Yeah. And so when he left, they thought, well, what do we do now? And they're auditioning people and they're doing all this stuff. And so Phil Collins is like, he'd like demo to people trying out. It goes like this. And then they finally said, Phil, why don't you just sing?
But then you got the singing drummer.
Yeah. And he didn't think of himself as being out front and all of that. But he's got such a distinct, I think he does a great job. And I can't imagine, Follow You, Follow Me, Turn It On Again. Duke is one of my favorite Genesis albums. It wouldn't work with anyone but Phil Collins. But a lot of the diehard fans of the weird Genesis, they're like, oh, they turned into a pop band. And it's like, whatever. It's still good.
I mean, if Genesis hadn't turned pop, we would not be celebrating Phil Collins' retirement. We'd be like,
you're right.
We would know him.
And there probably wouldn't have been a Phil Collins solo career. One of my favorite soundtrack albums of all time is the Tarzan soundtrack. Seriously. And it's awesome. It's great.
There you go.
So, okay, hit me with another one.
Okay, no, you're up.
You're okay.
I give you two.
Here's one. Okay. I just saw this and I have to mention it because I bought this with my own allowance money. The Village People, Cruisin'.
Oh, that's
brought us YMCA.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, my brother didn't want a tape anymore. He gave me it was like the greatest hits of Macho Man and YMCA.
I told you about I came home. I can't remember if it was this album or the follow-up Go West. I came home and it had a big fold-out poster
of men, like
of the Village People,
all
men,
oiled
right?
up.
Yeah, they're all. Oh yeah, they're in their costumes, and it's like it's like a foot tall, but then like 6 feet long. So it's a real long one with the close up and action shot of each one, right? And I shared a bedroom with my older brother, and for some reason I put it over his bed so I could see it, I guess, because it's on the other side of the room. And he comes in and he says, "What's that?" And he tears it down. Because he's like over there, he's listening to Styx and Kiss and stuff. And then I festoon the room with the big Village People.
All the oil
poster.
and the hair.
Yeah. So
no shaved chest on those guys.
That doesn't count. That was a joke. But that did come out that year. But here's an album that I really did like. Speaking of Styx, Pieces of 8 came out.
I have that on my list
in that year. And that, had obviously Renegade, Blue Collar Man, one of my favorite Styx songs, Queen of Spades. It's a good album. It's a rockin' album. That's before Cornerstone, which came out like a year or two later. And then even Paradise Theater, which was a big hit for them, it was starting to get a little softer, right? And then by Kilroy, that's when they were like a total Broadway. That was what broke up the band.
Yes. I remember, I think I was 11 and I was I'm not sure what band I was in middle school. And we took a trip from the Tri-Cities in Washington to Portland to do some kind of competition. Mm-hmm. We couldn't play our instruments for the damn. So. Anyway, my best friend, Mike Dotterer, if he's out there,
mm-hmm.
He had now I don't think it was a Walkman. It was like a Toshiba or Hitachi, a cassette player. It was magical. It had buttons on it. Yeah. He had batteries. I think I had some battery stuff, and my parents would never buy me batteries. But he had a headphone splitter.
Okay.
And so what a headphone splitter does is it splits out right and left. It doesn't give you two stereo signals. So he put this cassette on, Mr. Roboto. And I was like, what is this Broadway, man?
Yeah.
But you're hearing it monaural. You're just hearing one side,
One ear. Yeah.
Like half a drum set. I think we did that for like 8 hours on that bus trip, that one song.
Yeah. But
one album. But
Pieces of 8, Grand Illusion, Pieces of 8, those are, to me, that's the pinnacle of Styx right there. Those two albums. And this is a good one. So that's a great one from that year.
I got one.
Okay. Let's hear it.
More songs about buildings and food. by Talking Heads. And the track after that killed was Take Me to the River.
Take Me to the River. Okay.
That was like, when that sound came out, everybody took notice.
Yeah.
That was a game changer.
Yeah. That was a big album. And Talking Heads were interesting because, first of all, how many people were actually in the band, right? I think the band is like 4 people. And yet when you see them, it's an entourage. Right. Yeah, that's a good one.
Had Tina Weymouth.
Tina Weymouth.
And it was kind of interesting to see, like, there's a girl playing a bass guitar. What is going on?
Yeah.
The universe isn't right.
Something's wrong. But really good. Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, and she played all these tasty, memorable licks. It was really great.
And they were very much about the rhythm, right, and the vibe. They weren't a hard rock band. A lot of funky stuff and a lot of a lot of different rhythmic things going on.
They weren't playing stadiums.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And so part of what I want to talk about today was that whole CBGBs kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So what do you know about CBGBs? What can you tell me?
Well, CBGBs was a club that was groundbreaking. A lot of people started, right? The Ramones played CBGBs.
They came out in 78 too with an album.
Yeah, the Ramones did, and the other band you're thinking of, Blondie.
Mm-hmm.
All came up through CBGBs. Right. But CBGBs, I think they played a lot of different genres, though. There was a lot of different.
If I remember correctly, CBGB stands for country, bluegrass, and blues.
Really? I did not know that.
CBGB.
I didn't know that.
Country, bluegrass, and blues. So the owner, I think he wanted to make it a blues joint. Mm-hmm. And what happened was all these weirdos showed up. They didn't pay very much, so all the weirdos showed up.
Yeah.
And they'd play on a Tuesday or Wednesday. And they got this groundswell, and everybody started playing there.
Yeah.
I think the Police even played there.
I think you're right. Yeah. Talking Heads probably played there at some point.
A lot. They played there a lot, I think.
But when I think of CBGBs, I think of the Ramones and I think of Blondie, who both had albums.
And both had albums that year.
Yeah. And in fact, Parallel Lines may be my favorite Blondie album. And that's where I think, and I could have this story wrong, but Giorgio Moroder, he's kind of a hipster. He's the producer, the electronic.
Italio
disco.
Yeah.
He produced Parallel Lines, right? So you get the kind of punky Blondie sound, but then you get the Giorgio Moroder stuff. Call Me. That's not on this album. It's on the next album, or maybe 2 albums later. It's very much got the Giorgio Moroder, but even Heart of Glass, has the very Giorgio Moroder influences.
Man, there was a movie that he did that was just like he did a soundtrack to
something. Yeah, it was a famous late 70s.
Oh,
I know the one you're talking about. He did a couple soundtracks, and actually, I've been known to just go on Spotify and hit Giorgio Moroder and listen to his. He does the theme for Coast to Coast AM. That's called The Escape, I think, is what that song's called.
So I think it was the movie Electric Dreams that had a young, what's her name, blonde gal.
There's even a more famous one, though, that he did, too. But anyways, yeah, so Blondie... and we mentioned the Ramones. They had an album in 78.
Yep. Their best hit ever.
Which, Blitzkrieg Bop? Is that their best one? Or which one?
I Want to Be Sedated.
Okay. They're both on that album.
Everybody knows that chorus. Yeah. And the verses, I guess.
Okay. Is it your turn or my turn?
I think it's your turn.
One of my favorite albums, Hemispheres by Rush, came out.
Wow.
And... this is what I call the final bathrobe era Rush album from Hemispheres. So this was the last one with the the Hemispheres it's longer than 2112. It's like 23 minutes long. So it's got side one is one song, right? In different parts, right? And it's, part 2 of the famous Cygnus X1, which started on the previous album. But it's great. I love it. I love this album. Of course, by 1980, with Permanent Waves, they really started to tighten things up, and they got away from the long epic. I call them the nerd epics, right? But I like the nerd epics, right? So that's why I like that album. It's a great album. Your turn.
Okay. Joe Walsh. But seriously, folks.
Yes.
The big hit off that one was Life's Been Good.
Yeah. How long is that song? Like 12 minutes? 8 minutes? It's long. It's a
8
long
minutes
song.
and 56 seconds I got on my Spotify.
Love that. Love that song. That's a great song. I love that song. That's a song that just in your car sounds really good. I can remember just cranking that up.
I think that would be considered like 8-track rock.
I'm sure it is. And that one was so long that you'd have to split it over 2 tracks. Probably. So right in the middle, it would go. Then it fades in and starts again. That's a great. Okay, so here's another great album. We've talked about this one a lot. Of course, the first Cars album. And that, the joke was when the Cars were about to release their greatest hits album, someone just says, well, wasn't their first album their greatest hits album? Because all the good stuff is on. I mean, there's some other stuff, but it was really, and I like the Cars. I would say the first album is definitely 10 out of 10. And then the albums after that, there was never an album as good as the first one by the Cars. Well,
Rico Kasich got Polina Poroskova off of it. I mean,
yeah, well, so
he's batting 1,000 to me,
But yeah, the later Heartbeat City, they were okay. Panorama, okay.
So who was the singer in there? It was Rico Kasich.
Rico Kasich and Ben Orr.
Ben Orr, yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of bands where you have two. I guess Goo Goo Dolls a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, what's his name? Robbie Takak sings, but his songs aren't popular like.
Well, and the thing is a lot of times people don't realize. I've listened to him enough. I can easily tell it's Ben Orr or it's Rico Kasich, but a lot of people can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
So Just What I Needed is Ben Orr. Some of their biggest hits are Ben Orr, you know. But people always think of, Rico Kasich, but if you broke them down and look at it, I think you might find, I don't know. I'd have to look. I was going to say Ben Orr might have more of their hits than Rick does, but the first album is just phenomenal. The second side of the first album to me is possibly the best album side ever.
You think so?
I love it.
I mean, you've heard a lot of stuff.
I have, but I think that side, if I was going to pick, you can only pick one side of an album. That might be the one I picked. And notice they all fade together. It's all in one thing. Moving in Stereo, You're All I've Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love. It's just really good. All mixed up. It's all mixed up. And that's one you got to listen to in headphones.
Right.
Because there's all kinds of stuff going on. I love that.
All right. My next one is Some Girls by the Rolling Stones.
Ooh. That is a good one.
I could just imagine, like, okay, we're going to go in the studio. I got this part. I think we should play it on saxophone or maybe a flute. Or it just goes like this. How about we just use that? Oh, okay, let's go.
Okay, let's do it for 6 minutes. Yeah. I can remember. This is funny because
is that when they were like in the midst of the heroin and the just greasiness?
I don't know. I think 75 or 76 was when Ronnie Wood came in, and so when Mick Jones
died in the swimming pool, didn't he?
No, that's Brian Jones.
Brian Jones.
Mick Taylor. Sorry.
Okay.
Mick Taylor they bring in, and Mick Taylor, he was a blues guy, and so. They were kind of a more rockin' band once he came in. And then they were rumoring all these different rumors about who would replace Mick Taylor when he left, right? Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, they had mentioned, Steve Marriott from the Faces or Small Faces. They had all talked about these guys would be the replacement. As it turned out, it was Ron Wood, and Ron seems like the perfect guy because
he fits right in.
He fits right in. He's got the right hairdo and everything. So I just had this funny memory. Way too much information. My mom, when I was a kid, in Oklahoma. She worked at Kmart. She didn't actually work for Kmart.
Do you have to tell our younger listeners what Kmart is?
Okay. Kmart was it. Before Walmart, it was Kmart, right? It was just your department store thing. Blue Light Special. That's where the Blue Light Special
I remember
started.
having dinner
at Kmart. Totally.
They had a restaurant in some of them.
Yeah, you could go in and eat like
a ham steak and some mac and cheese.
Yeah, it was really bad.
With a side of cornbread.
So my mom, she didn't actually, for a while, she did work for Kmart. Then she got a job working for the greeting card company that stocked Kmarts.
Okay.
So
I thought she was writing these.
No. She
Sorry
just
for your loss.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, she would, on occasion, she would let me or my brother or both of us go up to Walmart. You mean
Kmart?
Not Walmart. Kmart, the SS Kresge Corporation that became Kmart. So we would go up for an hour or two while she's stocking the cards or whatever. And so I would always go and look in the record section. Well, some girls had that funny album cover that you could pull out. I'm making a confession that I've never made before.
What are you doing with your hands?
Okay, this is me. Here's where it gets scary, and I think the statute of limitations is up. But the album had all these little cutouts, right? So can you find a picture of the album? So on the album, there's like all these girls on the front, and then on the back, there's like cutouts on the album. So on that album, you could pull the album out and then slide it back in, and it would line up differently with the cutouts of the faces.
Oh, okay.
So making sure no one's looking. So I opened one of those albums once so I could pull it out and slide it back in to see how it would look. I never got caught. Okay. But that album cover is burned in my brain because I would go look at it and there's like these, because you could slide it in and it was the Rolling Stones faces. And they made some ugly women, right? If you line them up with the women on the album cover. Yeah. So I've never admitted that I was the one, Kmart, that opened that Rolling Stones album so I could pull the inner sleeve in and out to see how it would line up with the faces. But anyways.
They had to put that on the discount rack.
Yeah, exactly. They couldn't sell it because of me. So I'm not proud of it.
Is it my turn? Am I up? No, I gave you the Stones.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I keep talking too much. So I'm a sucker for Foreigner, and Double Vision came out and Foreigner gets, I don't know. I don't understand why some people, classic rock people, they don't like Foreigner.
They do not.
And I love Foreigner. I think they wrote great songs. I thought Lou Gramm was a great singer. Mick Jones, that's the Mick Jones I'm thinking of. Mick Jones is a great guitarist and producer, and I love this album. That had Hot Blooded on it. It had Double Vision. Is Dirty White Boy on that one? I can't remember. It's a great album. And that's, again, another one that I heard a lot on the radio. So listen to that a lot.
Okay, I think I'm up. 52nd Street by Billy Joel.
Oh, you have to be a big shot. Yeah, that's a good one.
So My Life is is the most listened to track on that one.
Okay, yeah.
Honesty on there.
Honesty. That is a good album. Wow.
Yeah.
See, I came into Billy Joel and I kind of went backwards, but Glass Houses, which was 80, I loved that album. And by then I was full on listening to music. So I bought Glass Houses and went back later, and I had 52nd Street on a cassette. I remember that was a good album.
And Billy Joel, as a musician goes, fabulous.
Oh,
incredible.
Unbelievable.
And the stuff he plays on piano, rock pianists don't play.
Right.
That is not where they live. His is more kind of classical, almost like parlor piano. Like it was basically his albums were set up to showcase him and his piano playing the best that they could. So, he's got some great songs on there.
Yeah. It's a great album. Yeah. I had not even thought about that one. Here's one. Cheap Trick's Heaven Tonight. That brought us, of course, Surrender. That's kind of the song Heaven Tonight is that's a dark song.
I don't think I've heard that
creepy song. Yeah, it's a great album. In Color and Heaven Tonight, most people will say those are the two best Cheap Trick albums, and I wouldn't argue with them. I think that they probably are. Now, what's interesting is the Budokan album, I think, came out in 78 also. But Heaven Tonight, it was really Budokan that put them, it was that album that put them on the map.
They were kind of a talented bar band before them.
Totally. They didn't really have anything going on. The album version off In Color of I Want You to Want Me is terrible. But the live version that we all know, that came from Budokan. And of course, that propelled Heaven Tonight, because Heaven Tonight was the album they were out touring when they did the whole Budokan thing. And that just, that put them on the map.
So let's talk about Japan a little bit. Why does Japan embrace certain artists that are not known in America?
I don't know. I don't know. Cheap Trick is one of those.
I would love to have a deep dive. Maybe get a
that would be a good.
Oh yeah, if we can get somebody from Japan that would
that would be
give
awesome.
us some insight on why bands break Japan and they break the
US. That's a great idea. And you know what's funny? For my genre, the stuff I like, which is that kind of 80s metal stuff, they're still huge in Japan. Michael Schenker is still giant in Japan.
Anvil. Have you seen that?
Anvil. Yeah, that's awesome. I haven't seen it, but I've, a lot of these metal bands are just really big. Graham Bonnet and Alcatraz, they're really big in Japan. They can still go over there and pack these big places and play.
And I think Japan is about 300 million people, so it's almost, I think it's about the same size as the United States.
Yeah,
so.
For sure. So if you can hit it in Japan, hit it big in Japan, then you're okay.
Maybe we should go learn to speak Japanese.
Maybe we should. There's our chance.
Konnichiwa.
Maybe that's and there were a lot of bands, Quiet Riot, right? The early Quiet Riot, when they still had Randy Rhoads, they had 2 albums that they had released in Japan.
Yeah, there's often just releases for Japan.
Yeah, but nothing here. They didn't have anything going on here.
I really like to know what's going on with Japan.
Mm.
Okay, my next one is the album Jazz from Queen. With the big track was Fat Bottom Girls.
Is that on that one? I know Bicycle Race is on that one.
And Bicycle Races. And Mustafa.
Oh, yeah. I like it.
78 was a monster year for evergreens.
Yeah, and so here's another big debut, and I'm surprised you haven't mentioned it yet.
It may be on my list. Let's see.
The Police.
Oh.
That was their debut album.
Oh, yes.
And I remember
Outlandos d'Amor.
That's the one. Roxanne. And I remember the first time I heard that song. So Lonely and
Can't Stand Losing
You. That's
Born in the 50s.
My favorite one. So I remember the first time I heard that, I just remember when I finally saw The Police, I was surprised that they were white.
I was too.
I assumed it was like a Jamaican
That's
reggae
what
band
I thought too.
or something. And folks that are young, that don't remember the days before video, is you might hear bands for years before you ever saw what they looked like.
Yeah, you had to go search for them. They had magazines that you would Tiger Beat or whatever.
Or you'd have to actually go look at the record store and find a picture of them on the album. But I never knew, probably until the 80s, the early 80s. There's a plane flying over.
I'm getting strafed here.
I never knew until the early 80s that the Police were a bunch of white guys.
Yeah.
You know? But I remember hearing Roxanne the first time, and I thought, I liked it, but it was a really different, I'd never heard anything like that. I thought, that's an interesting song.
And I think the drumming on it is just fantastic.
Oh, it's awesome. The bass playing's everything's fantastic on it.
Okay.
It's great.
Am I up next?
You're up next.
The Band.
Ooh.
They released this album, The Band, and the biggest song on that album was Up on Cripple Creek.
Up on Cripple Creek. Yeah, okay, that's a huge album. When you talk about influential albums, that's a good one. Now, here's one. This is a critic's darling band that never got popular, but some people think they're like the greatest band ever. And that's Big Star.
Yeah, I saw them on a list.
And this is their album, Third Sisters Lovers. I'm not even familiar with it.
I'm not familiar with them at all. I've heard that they're magical.
I have heard the first Big Star album. Alex Chilton from the Box Tops, he was in Big Star. But anyways, they're great. It's cool. That should be one of our albums we do, is we'll do that Big Star.
I think we should take them to Japan.
Well, their first album, which this is very clever, their first album is called Number One Record.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we'll do an episode on that. We'll listen to that. So, here's one I have to mention. It was, when it came out, probably wasn't as impactful as it became later, but Judas Priest Stained Class came out in 78.
It did.
Exciter. Stand back for Exciter. Okay, that was a good album. I like that one.
I got one. Let's do Like a Machine Gun.
Okay, let's do it. Okay. I'm ready.
AC/DC with Powerage.
Oh, good one.
Called Bon Scott before Bon Scott was not Bon Scott anymore.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, here's one of my favorites. Jerry Rafferty, City to City. Baker Street.
I don't know that one.
I love that. I love that album. I've gotten in a Jerry Rafferty kick over the last few years. He's very folky. You know, like Baker Street, the song Baker Street. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that song. It's on that album, but the whole album's really good. Okay, hit me with one.
You're Gonna Get It by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Oh. How about Rod Stewart, Blondes Have More Fun? That's a good one.
I'm not a big Rod Stewart fan. But
sorry, it's your turn, but I'm going to say this one. Black Sabbath, Never Say Die, the last album with Ozzy.
I wonder how that one went.
And Van Halen blew them off the stage every night.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
That's what everyone says. Is they just blew them away every night.
London Town by Wings. The track With a Little Luck.
With a little luck. That's a good one. Ted Nugent, Weekend Warriors. Some would say that's his last good album.
I don't think he had a good one.
Yeah. Well, he did.
Okay.
The first, I would say he had 3 really good albums, but by this time it's kind of eh.
I got Don't Look Back by Boston. Don't look back.
That's a good one. That's
Tom
a good one.
Scholes, man.
Yeah, that's a good one, and that's again one of those albums that almost every track gets played on classic rock in high rotation, almost as much as the first Boston album. That's good. I'm sure we're leaving some out.
I got one from Bruce Springsteen, released "Darkness on the Edge of Town."
Yeah, and a lot of folks will say that's his best album ever. I don't know. Are you a Springsteen fan?
I'm an 80s Springsteen. I'm more like the Courtney Cox kind of Springsteen fan. I want to be Bruce Springsteen and have Courtney Cox with her short hair dance on stage with me.
I try, and Dan, who's our blogger, big Springsteen fan. In fact, full disclosure, Dan is my brother-in-law. And so right after, it might have even been before Laura and I were married. So this is early 90s. He gave me the whole the Bruce Springsteen and the East Street Band 5 Sides Lives. That was called. It's a 5-side album.
So what do they do with the 6th side?
I don't remember. There was but that's what they call it. I think the 6th side was actually studio stuff.
Oh,
but
it
then
was just
5
blank.
It was just blank.
I would have left it blank.
But he bought me that, and I tried to get into Springsteen because Dan just loved Bruce Springsteen.
He's got a certain magic.
And I think in terms of, he's like a Bob Dylan, right? He's a writer. He writes these compelling songs. I just couldn't get into. That's not saying he's not talented he just couldn't get into him. But that, they will tell you that Darkness on the Edge of Town, lots of folks will say that's his best album. And who am I to disagree?
You got another one? I got one.
Okay. You hit me with one.
Did we say Elvis Costello?
No.
This Year's Model. With the track Pump It Up.
Pump It Up. Great song. Okay, here's my last one.
I'll let you end.
Okay, here's my last one. Controversial, but I like it. It's the Doobie Brothers, Minute by Minute. Controversial because a lot of the old-time Doobies fans, they think Michael McDonald ruined the Doobie Brothers. And it did become a different band once Michael McDonald came in. They weren't China Grove anymore. Now they're What a Fool Believed. They really did change. But I like it. I like it. So that'll be my last pick. Oh, but then I see other ones.
I got one.
Okay.
That's going to probably I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in the last one.
Okay, that's okay. You can do it.
The album is Kaya, Kaya, by Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Oh, okay.
And the song Is This Love came off of...
Is this love? That's a good one. Now, here's one, and I said I was going to stop.
Me too.
But I didn't stop. Did I already mention the Parallel Lines, Blondie's Parallel Lines?
You did.
Okay, all right. So I don't want to make sure I didn't forget that.
CBGBs.
But here's another one. It's a live album, and it's a really good live album. Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy.
Ooh.
It's a good album. Yeah, it's a great one. You know what's not on my list I'm looking at? There's a Whitesnake album from 78, I think.
Whitesnake?
I think there is. Maybe I'm wrong. Is there
maybe they were brunettes back then. they didn't get the Clairol.
I do have to check this out now just to see if there was a Whitesnake album.
I wanted to own Jaguars, but I didn't want to have anybody rolling around. Get off my car. You're scratching the lacquer.
Okay, so the Whitesnake album in 1978 is Trouble. This is, I think, their first album, and I have listened to this, and it's good. I do like it, but it's not the album I was thinking of. I was thinking of the Live in the Heart of the City, which was a live album later. But so there was a Whitesnake album that year, which actually John Lord was on keyboards. So John Lord from Deep Purple, David Coverdale from Deep Purple. It's great. At some point, Cozy Powell's in Whitesnake. Cozy Powell's played in, I think, every band in the world. So anyways, so that's another album. This was a lot of fun.
This was a heck of a lot of fun.
Talking about these. 78 was a great year. I'll put a plug in. The last episode of the Classic Guitar Rock Time Machine. You can check it out on any of those stations. Here's a little secret too. I post it on the YouTube channel too, so you can hear it if you want to go listen to it.
And I'm going to post my my playlist from Spotify of the top songs off the top albums of 78. And you can listen to them.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for listening. Again, you can email us. You can contact us via the website, classicguitarrock.com. And we appreciate our folks that support us on Patreon. If you're able to do that, you can be a Patreon supporter for as little as $3 a month. But thank you so much for listening. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. Bye, John.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
Oh, sweetney!
Please like, subscribe, and share. You can email us at classicguitarrock@mail.com.
We're not ordinary people. We're morons.
We'll see you for the next episode of the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.